Welcome back to our presentations for juniors on the college search process. This one will cover what do colleges want. As you can see from this picture, many people think that colleges want a well-rounded student, which makes students think they need to know foreign languages, be athletic, play a musical instrument, have high academics, participate in all kinds of high school activities. Actually, colleges do want to see students that have engaged in their high school community by participating in activities and by taking classes that are challenging and that they also enjoy. So they are actually looking more for pointed students. In other words, students who kind of lean in one direction or another, that have a passion. Certainly freshman year, they expect you to try out a few things. By sophomore year, they're looking for a little bit more engagement and selectivity. And by junior and senior year, are looking for a little bit more involvement. But the overriding factor in any college's decision to accept a student is always by looking at objective information, starting with the transcript. So the most important factor in admission will be your transcript. In other words, the courses that you took and the grades you received in those courses. Along with the academic coursework, they're going to look at the rigor of the curriculum. If you got all A's in prep level courses, at some point they might like to see you challenge yourself and go up a little bit in either rigor or challenge. So maybe they'd like to see you take an Excel class or an AP class. A lot of students think they just have to load up their especially junior and senior years with a lot of AP courses. And that's not necessarily the case. What they'd like to see is an upward trend overall of taking on a little bit more rigor, or if you started off very rigorously, certainly to maintain that. So trend is something that they'll look at. You should know that whenever the colleges review applications, they're going to view you in context with other LT students. So you're not getting compared to Hinsdale students, you're not getting compared to students who live in another state or even in the nearby county. It's looking at you compared to the other students at LT, because this is where they can kind of get the context of the academic and social environment and opportunities that you have here at LT. So we send, with every transcript, a school profile. This school profile will indicate all of our levels, explain what an Excel level is or an AP, how many courses we offer, and what levels they're offered, so that they can see exactly the opportunities that were afforded you academically. It also indicates the number of extracurriculars that we have, clubs, activities, athletics, other things that would enrich your time here. So basically they're saying, we're going to look at you in the context of the environment that you're in, the opportunities that were afforded to you academically, personally, and socially, and what you took advantage of. They will then take a look at testing. Now, many schools have gone test optional these days, which means that they are not requiring that you take an ACT or an SAT. We still have a state requirement for the SAT, and we'll be offering it this spring for students. But colleges right now are saying either students weren't able to test because of COVID, or they may choose not to send a test score if the student feels that it doesn't reflect their academic background appropriately. That's going to be totally up to you. I will say at this point, traditionally, test optional schools have received test scores from about 60% of students. I don't know how much that will change for your class, but the schools that have gone test optional have pretty much gone test optional for this current year and also into next year. And you can check that list out by going to fairtest.org. We no longer rank, but if a school does rank, then that is often used as another factor that colleges will look at as an objective fact. They also will look at subjective factors. So for instance, I just mentioned that they'd like to see an increase in your trend in grades. I'd also like to see an increase in your involvement and your contributions to any clubs or activities that you're involved in. You don't have to be the president of the club to show leadership or achievement. You can explain how you were head of a committee, or you had a project that maybe a fundraiser that you oversaw or were a part of, and you can list that as leadership. Certainly you'll have your own personal essay that you'll write to the school, either in one that you'll send to all schools if you're using the Common Application, or a personal statement for a specific school explaining who you are, what your interests are, your passions, what you'd like to study, or any of a number of other prompts. But basically, the college really wants an essay so they can learn more about you. So we will talk more about that near the end of the year, because we'd like you to start working on that essay over the summer. Finally, letters of recommendation from teachers or your counselor will help support your overall application. And a number of schools use these. There are some that do not. They strictly look at those GPA, the test scores, the academic record, the rigor, etc., and will use other subjective factors, but not to the extent as other schools will, as some other colleges will. So what does a good college list look like? First of all, it's in the single digits. We do have students who apply to 20 or more schools, and we are not suggesting that you do that unless you're really kind of fishing for a specific program, or it just so happens you're looking at highly selective schools and perhaps are looking for aid from one of those particular schools. The national average is that students apply to 4 to 5 colleges. And actually, we fall in line with that national average as well. If you can keep it in the single digits, in other words, under 10, fewer than 10 schools, it's really to your benefit. It makes it a lot easier to figure things out later on. About two to 3 of the schools on your list should be schools that you're more likely to get into. How do you know that? You're going to look at the accepted students from last year. What was their GPA and what was their test score if they're posting that? And then look at something posted called the middle 50%. If you fall in that range of test scores and GPA, you are more likely to get into that school. So that's where the bulk of your school should be on your list. Certainly, a number of students have reached schools. In other words, they're so they really, really want to get into a school. They're really at the margins of the average student that is admitted, but they think they might have something to offer. You don't want to load up a lot of schools like that in your list, but you can have certainly 1 or 2. The exception would be those students, as I mentioned before, that are looking at very highly selective schools, where even when you meet all of the requirements and might be above that 50%, the school is just so selective that the chances are still small, or under 10% to some schools, that you might get in or not. Make sure every school meets your own priorities. Now, there's things that you thought were important to you, whether it was class size or geographic region or residential setting. Make sure that those are still in place for all the schools that you're applying to, and that every school that you apply to, you would be happy at if you were able to attend. You should always have a school that accounts for your family's financial situation. Sometimes those are called safety schools. I like to call them value schools. Often students apply, I have students apply to schools where they are above the middle 50%, or maybe even above the top students, but they know that they're eligible for scholarships or special study opportunities or honors programs by applying to those schools. So you should have 1 or 2 of those schools on your list. Make sure that this list represents a collaboration between you as a student, your parents, and your counselor, where you're discussing why you'd like to attend that particular school and why it would be a good fit for you. I hope you'll take all of these into consideration and contact me or your counselors if you have any questions. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.